you're ready, I'll push the button.
Okay, we're ready.
All right, there we go.
Thank you. Good morning again. We're back from executive session, and thank you for joining us for the May 20th board meeting. I have two changes in the agenda that I'd like to mention. One is Ron Thomas will be presenting the work of the Blower Noise Task Force, and the second is Victoria Shanahan will be presenting the financials. Mr. Secretary, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 25th meeting?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Good. Good morning again, and we do appreciate your patience during the executive session. Hopefully we kept it to brief enough. And also thank you for attending the annual meeting that we had a few weeks ago, or at least watching the meeting later on our website. After the meeting, during the Q&A, one of our members raised a question that we weren't able to answer on the spot. They were concerned about the noise coming from boom boxes on golf carts from guests and members playing at the resort courses. It turns out that Steve Birdwell of the resort happened to be in the audience that day and responded that very day. Their starters and course rangers now reinforce with all players the importance of moderating the volume in consideration of homeowners and other players. So I just would like to thank Steve and the resort team for being so quick and so responsive. It's greatly appreciated. We are committed to serving all members and making the experience of property owners in Sea Pines an incredibly positive one that really reflects our position as the premier community in Hilton Head. I think we've made great progress over the past few years working to have the pulse of the members and to understand your expectations and to respond to your concerns. We do have members in many, many different stages of life and purpose for being here in Sea Pines. And with that comes an enormous array of expectations. We've got your full-time residents who are much more sensitive to daily routines and changes and concerns about overcrowding and traffic. We've got second homeowners who don't get to see or use Sea Pines frequently, or for some reason, or for some, there is the added incentive or motivation to rent their places due to tax law changes. And then we've got investors and renters who are more concerned about how our community presents to guests, what their access is to amenities and parking, and who may not personally be able to use Sea Pines as often as they'd like. So we are a volunteer-led organization, and our membership is fully voluntary. Our funding is dues-based. It is both in our financial best interest to grow our membership, and it is also paramount to being able to say we have a broad understanding of and represent all homeowners. Our future is completely up to us, and I don't think we can afford to get complacent or represent one type of owner. So the bottom line today is I'm asking everyone to consider devoting some time to your property owners association. Run for the board, serve on a committee, serve on a task force. I repeat, run for the board. Applications are due August 1. And I happened to be reading the newspaper this morning, which is rare at this hour of the day, but anyway, and I came upon a horoscope. So all of you whose birthday is Cancer and your birthday is June 21 to July 22nd, I need to share with you, it's time for a change. Check out what's going on in your community. See if you can offer your services, skills, or help. 4 stars. So in case you missed it, I'm here to help. The other thing is Zoom, which has completely changed our lives, and it's a good thing. Finally, distance has been removed as any kind of stumbling block for any kind of property owner, remote, here, wherever, to participate or volunteer with ASPPPO. And should you make the leap to volunteer, what would that look like? What would being a board member look like? Well, we only have 5 board meetings a year. That would be 5 board meetings a year, and we're pretty informal. There are only 2 standing committees, and the task forces come and go depending upon what the needs are. What would you talk about? I mean, what would you work on? Well, we've got community and communications. And I think what we know and what we don't know about Sea Pines is a lot. This is an enormous place. Does anybody out there know what all of our amenities are, the times they are available, and the precise cost of that amenity? I don't know. How many community members, either active or retired, would be interested in sharing their skills with us, like painting lessons or writing lessons or photography, yoga? And I guess the other question I have is, what exactly is the Forest Preserve? I never stepped foot in it until about a year ago, and I wonder how many other people are in the same place. What do post-COVID state-of-the-art planned communities look like? Is there anything we can do to help there? And maybe address some activities. Organize a Meet Your Neighbor happy hour from time to time, or launch a Founders Day where we celebrate Charles Frazier, a Founders Day celebration. So I ask again, please picture yourself on this board of directors being in one of these little squares. And that would be a board with new, fresh faces, hopefully yours. Make a contribution, your time, your ideas, your energy. I really do invite you to be part of shaping our future. It's very easy. All you have to do is go to aspo.net/election and fill out the application, and the nominating committee will guide any interested members through the process. So I want to thank you again, and we'll get back to the meeting. And Stephen, if you want to bring Victoria on for our financial update, please.
All right, I'll be giving that. She's posted.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, the balance sheet, and this will be through March 31. You can see our cash is at 67,000 versus 54 last year. Total cash and cash equivalents is at 74 versus 136 last year. The reason being that it's less is we have more money invested in our securities, which is just under there. You can see we're at a total of 391 versus 304 last year. Total assets is about $36,000 higher at 476 versus 440,000. Liabilities, the accounts payable to CSA. CSA basically pays our bills and just moves them over to us. So those are some they just haven't moved over yet, and they will do that. Undesignated fund balance, you can see that if you include cash and our investments, we're running better than last year. So very healthy balance sheet this year as compared to previous. Moving on to the income statement, and the first thing I'll do is just compare the 2 years, and I'll touch on the budget. As you can see, year over year, we're at 171,000 in revenues versus 123 last year. This is due to the dues is at $50 versus 35 last year. So that is helping us in that way. Expenses, a land use monitor. I'll remind you that we share 50% of the expense with CSA. So that's what that is. The next one that's significant would be the legal and professional fees at 14,000 versus this time last year was none. And basically we've got a referendum lawsuit that we, ASPO was included in, that we're having to defend ourselves. And so those are most of what those fees are. Rent is what CSA charges us for a share of office space there, as well as CSA service fees, what they charge us for handling administrative. Bank services, that's basically the bank lock box where we're collecting dues that are coming in. We're still well, the annual meeting this year was earlier this month versus last year was in October. So we have incurred expenses for annual meeting this year. Last year we did not due to being a later meeting. So total expenses at 41,000 versus 34 last year, primarily because of defending ourselves in that lawsuit. But bottom line, if you look, the excess revenues over expenses were at 125,000 this year versus 88 last year. Our goal this year is to actually build on our investment so that we have more than we had the previous year in our marketable securities. So we see that as a strength of ASPPPO to have that. Quickly touching on where we are to budget, you can see with revenues we're at 171 versus a budget of 179. So we're hoping a few more members join to bring us up to that 179. Expenses, we're at 129. Or excuse me, we're at 41 compared to the 43 that we budgeted. So, so we're very close if we can get a few more members to join to meeting our budget. So that concludes my report, Paula.
Thank you very much. Dana, question?
Yeah, a couple of comments. I think you mentioned the land use management costs. I believe we share 40% of those costs, 20% are ARB. Just, it's not 50%, I don't believe, unless something's changed.
That's correct.
And also the other lawsuit that we are not just not defending ourselves, but we're the plaintiffs for was the 88 Lawton case, and some of our funds went toward that.
Yes, and a little explanation on some of the lawsuits. We do have insurance, but there are deductibles that are involved with the insurance. So that's what's reflected. Thank you very much.
And the other point with, so that people understand, the 88 Lawton case, that we actually won that case, and part of the judgment is that the legal costs would be reimbursed. We'll see if we're able to accomplish that.
Yeah, we haven't counted that. That's
right. No,
thank you.
But just to clarify.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, on to communications and website. Greg, do you have anything to add today?
Nothing to update at this time, Paula.
Okay, thank you. Membership committee, Lee.
Yeah, just a quick update. The membership committee had its first meeting on April 26th. There are 8 community members on the committee, plus myself. And we have an opening on the committee for one more member, which would be somebody who owns in Sea Pines and rents their house. We're still trying to fill a position with that background. The goals of the committee are to establish the value of an ASPPPO membership. And the committee identified 3 audiences that they felt we needed to communicate with, those being new Sea Pines owners, non-ASPPPO members that are Sea Pines owners, and renewing ASPPPO members, so that when people's renewal comes up, which everybody's comes up the end of the year, that we have a communication to our members to renew and remind them of what the value is. So we're working on that value statement. One of the things the committee asked for was input from the board as to what the board members felt the value of ASPPPO was. And I just want to thank all the board members. Had 100% response from the 9 board members. So I appreciate that. And the next membership meeting is June 7th. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. The blower task force, Grover.
Yes, you may remember we've reported to the board throughout this past year of our progress and our research that has developed as a result of concerned property owners for the noise of leaf blowers within Sea Pines. So I want to thank our task force for a year's worth of hard work. I'm co-chaired with Bill Johnson, also Barry Barth, Gene Henry, Ron Thomas, Bing West, And then also Paula Scanlon has really jumped in and did a line's worth of work during these last few months. And I want to thank her and Ron for preparing today's presentation so that we can further give you the results of what we found and hopefully bring you a recommendation today. Ron, do you want to present your slides?
I can, if Paula, if you can actually show them on the screen. I don't have that capability. I'm using just an iPad. And so on to slide 2 shows the list of the members that were just mentioned. Slide 3, our activities, this is a quick summary of our activities. When we started this effort, I think myself and most of us thought that what we were going to have to do is recommend a battery powered leaf blowers. And as you'll see during this evolution, we actually found that gasoline powered leaf blowers were more than adequate. And then there's the other items that we'll cover, review what's for sale, the noise ordinances, and then the survey of the members and our draft recommendation. On to slide 4. This is an example of what noise pollution is defined as. What we're driving towards is a noise level for leaf blowers of 65 decibels at 50 feet. And you can see by the scale, that's in a very comfortable conversational tone. You can still talk over top of the leaf blower. I have one myself, and it does work. But if you get up to the what's currently available and older models that are still being used, the noise level can go up to 90 to 115 decibels. And if you look at that scale, that's pretty noisy. And you can see it takes a big leap from 65 decibels to 75 is 10 times as loud, and then 100 times loud if you go to 85 decibels. So it's an exponential type curve. Then on slide 5, we show one manufacturer, and all manufacturers are similar. One manufacturer's excuse me, version of their leaf blowers. And we found that the handheld leaf blowers are in that 60 to 65 decibel range. But if you look at the Newton force as an example, you can see you go down from a small handheld. So what's counterintuitive is small blowers do not mean quieter. You have to get to a certain size before you can add on the engineered features that make a blower quiet. But you can make a professional, and they do sell, several manufacturers do sell a 65 decibel rated backpack professional blower. The key takeaway there is look at like the max velocity, 200 miles an hour. That's significant to move any of the type leaves that we have in our community. The Newton force, as you can see at the bottom, 1 kilogram of mass at a rate of 1 meter per second squared is the acceleration. A professional over on the far right-hand side means that the blower can move gravel across your lawn or across your driveway. So you only need to get to the gravel moving, or the BR 500 in this example. The BR 600 and 700, yes, they're about the same max velocity. Yes, they have more Newton force, and the cost is still approximately the same. If you listen to the blowers that are being used in our community that are very noisy, you'll notice that the user is revving them a lot. And that's because you don't really use the max blowing power on a sustained basis. You use a lower amount, but that lower amount, because of the design of those older blowers, is a very noisy device. And then we go on to slide 6. You can see we did a survey of noise ordinances, starting with the federal government. state of South Carolina, Beaufort, town of Hilton Head, and then our own community. And you can see within our own community, we already have in effect a more restrictive than the town of Hilton Head. For instance, no noisy work after 7 p.m. in our community. We also don't allow large or commercial people from doing work on Sundays. Any work that makes noise is not allowed on Sundays. California, other states are even getting more restrictive at the state level, but we're not there yet. What we want to do is lead by example. On to slide 7. Did a membership survey, and what is shocking to me is the 77% agreement is so statistically significant that those are the people that are, and the 45% response rate is also significant. That means a lot of people responded, and a lot of people responded in favor of. If you were to push the poll further and ask the final 55%, what do they think? Now that they know that the agreement is 77%, I am very confident that you would find that if you polled 100% of our community, you would end up with a statistical number of agreement in the order of 80 or more %, because people do like to jump onto the bandwagon once they know the general direction. And it's a clear direction, clear message. And the feedback comments are typical of what was received. On to slide 8. So when we were thinking about this, we try to figure out, well, who should it be applicable to? And for this time period, we would like to limit it to being applicable to commercial lawn and pool care people. They're the ones that are likely to have the very noisy blowers, and they're the ones that we can easily manage. Anybody can actually measure the noise level. Just go to your, if you have an iPhone, you can download a noise measuring device. And these devices on your phone, these apps on your phone, are considered reasonably accurate for the intent of use. So for instance, if you measure 65 decibels on your phone, it's not really 100 decibels. It might be 65 decibels plus or minus a few. It's not, so it's pretty accurate. We recommend, well, and that's something for the ASPPPO and CSA boards to figure out how to enforce it. I'll leave that for a conversation with Paul and Grover. We recommend that this can be implemented now. And it can be implemented now, well, January of next year, or the first quarter of next year, because we found that the talking to the different vendors that the equipment life cycle of these blowers is not very long. Some people will just keep replacing spark plugs and other things. Some companies, they'll just replace the entire unit. So it might be about an 18-month life cycle. But we also were concerned about, we didn't want to be a significant impact on the small one guy lawn maintenance crew. So we looked at that. We found out that, you know, what do they typically charge a customer for their hourly rate? What is their total cost per year? And what is the cost of the equipment? And with the equipment being 1%, we felt that that's not really imposing too much of an imposition on the different small or large businesses. It scales up to large businesses. If they have 100 people working in Sea Pines, it would just be still 1% approximately. Then of course, if we don't take action, are we really ambivalent about the noise pollution? And on to slide 9, our recommended policy is clearly stated here with emphasis on residential property owners are encouraged to follow the guideline, but we're not saying they're required to. At this time, we don't think that is the focus of most of the noise in our community. It is commercial lawn care and pool care. And then exceptions, because after a big named storm or on the golf course, or if you're going to do a parking lot, those are wheeled blowers. Those are the ones that really, we don't have a choice to clear that much area, like our cart paths, bike trails. You pretty much need to use a wheeled, and whatever, there's pretty much only one made for those. It's not like a choice in terms of a noise compliant blower for them. And Grover, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, Paula, you probably want to open it up for discussion, or?
Yes. Questions? Bill?
I really appreciate all the work that everyone has done on this. On the survey that was done, we had a response rate of 45%, which I think is a phenomenal percentage. But what was the number on that?
I can go back and find it for you. The number, it was almost half of the number of email addresses that we have. Don't forget, we're building email addresses.
Right, sure.
And we have a little over half of the member email addresses.
Well, that's pretty significant. I mean, we're talking,
Yes.
At least 1,000 people, right, or somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a mandate.
Yeah, that's kudos to everyone on that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Dana.
A few questions. So you mentioned the positive reasons that people sent in for wanting this, but you didn't give any of the reasons why people might be against it. Were there any written comments as to that?
There were a couple, and I think one of them was an hour once a week doesn't really bother me. That was from a property owner. To me, this situation that we're trying to resolve is not an hour's worth of noise once a week. It's out of control. It's on every property, not just your own.
I just felt it was important to hear both sides. That's all.
Thank you.
So a couple of clarifications for me. In your slide, you had the still blowers as an example and the range of the operations, and you have them going up to 75 decibels. Is that right on that slide, Ron?
Yes, I can pull it up again if you'd like.
Correct. That's for what's currently available and commonly purchased.
Okay. Is that the maximum blower? If it's set at maximum, is that the loudest it is, or it?
Correct.
It is. Okay. So if somebody were to buy any of those pieces of equipment and use at the maximum of 75, would that be acceptable?
You mean if they bought a one that can make a lot more noise and they use it at a lower 65 decibel rating?
No, I'm asking if they were to use any of those and it operated at 75, because that's still lower by 20 decibels what the town of Hilton Head requires at property line. So I'm asking, would that be satisfactory according to the task force? Or are you suggesting at what level are you suggesting the maximum should be in terms of decibel level?
We're suggesting 65 decibels measured at 50 feet. And the reason for that is the blower industry has established that as their goal, what they are working towards. They've already achieved it on a majority of their blowers. They are working towards that on the higher force blowers now. So 65 decibels is considered the reasonable industry standard. If we were to go different from that, that would be odd. And also even 10 decibels more is 10 times louder.
I understand. I'm just thinking in terms of measurement consistency. And so it would really be at this point a matter of identifying the different brands and models that the different people use, and then saying these brands and these models at this time and date are acceptable. Anything else is not acceptable. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, not really. We took the engineering approach of you establish the limit of 65 decibels at 50 feet because the manufacturers will constantly modify their equipment. So it doesn't matter if it's a Model 500. If it was a Model 500 purchased 5 years ago, it's 90 decibels. So you can't really do that. You have to use a sound number.
Okay. So, okay. I'm struggling with how that's gonna work. I know you said that, so that's why I'm saying, would it be something that we would say, okay, this equipment model as of this date and anything after that date is okay? Because we're not gonna be able to have people lined up and measuring things.
But that's what we're saying is the requirement, and that puts the burden on the user to know their equipment and the changing of the things. It'll be very difficult for us to keep track of each model number and what date it became. And it's very easy just with your iPhone app just to measure it if you want to measure it. They can measure it, we can measure it.
Yeah.
Okay, Paula.
Yeah, one of the reasons that you see sort of predominantly featured there is we leave it to CSA to determine enforcement. They are the governing body, but the other reason is they have the direct interface with the commercial vendors. So there are things that they can do. I don't think we have insight into how they interface, what they have set up. So that's why it would be up to them.
I'm just trying to understand what the recommendation is and what it means and how
yeah, the recommendation is the threshold.
That's exactly what I'm trying to understand. And then, so let me just make sure I understand one other piece of data. So that you said that, and I may have written this down wrong, so please forgive me if I got this wrong. So you're saying that battery operated ones work for a couple of hours before they have to be recharged. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
That's correct. At the homeowner level or even the professional level, the professional backpack battery operated one operates typically about an hour of continuous use before you have to replace the battery. So a commercial vendor doesn't run the backpack blower for 8 hours a day, but they might run it for 6 hours because the worker does other activities, not just blow constantly. So he would need to have 5 or 6 batteries recharged every night. And we found that that's going to be a pretty big burden. So we're not telling them to not use battery powered. We're letting them decide if they want battery powered or gas powered. But gas powered was very favored when I spoke to the different vendors, Greenery and Ocean Woods and Brightview. They said they're just used to gas. It's easy for them all day. They don't have to remember to charge. They can easily buy gasoline to keep it going.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of suspected. I didn't know that, so thank you for that clarification. And that again goes back to then it's easy to say, okay, battery powered ones are okay. Anybody who wants to use battery, that's going to be great. But to your point, if we're going to say gas is okay, then it comes down to documenting noise and that kind of thing. So I just want to understand what we're talking about. So thank you.
Lee.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is why the named storm exception? We have storms all the time that aren't named storms that give us significant debris. Are we not opening up? I mean, is there debris? I'm thinking of the named storms we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't know that the debris from a named storm is any more significant than some of the other storms we get, and whether it's worth having that exception. So I'm interested in that. And then let me ask the second part, and then you can respond. To me, the biggest issue is you can set your standard anywhere you want, but enforcement is the critical part. Is anybody can have an ordinance on noise. Who's going to enforce it and how?
I think I just answered that one.
Well, you mentioned CSA, you mentioned the who, but not
Yeah.
the how.
Well, I think it would be very presumptuous to tell CSA how to do their job. So
Yeah.
it's up to them to figure out how, within the power that they have and the bandwidth that they have, to do it. I
think that's going to be very difficult. I think that, the devil's always in the details, and having enforcement. So I'm at home, I hear a leaf blower next door that's extremely loud. By the time I complain about it, that one, maybe I get a measurement, but now you're going to have every homeowner measuring things. And are they measuring it at 50 feet? Are they measuring it at 40 feet? Are they measuring it at 100 feet? By the time they report it to somebody, that landscaper's on to the next job. So,
I believe if it were easy, this would have been done years ago.
right, and I'm
yeah,
suggesting
Ron?
that we can set a standard, but the likelihood of an enforcement to me is going to be very difficult, if at all.
So I did speak to some of the officers that work for Toby, and Toby actually gave us some technical information as well. But they do get called to noise complaints on a routine basis, not leaf blower noise things, but they do go to respond to noise complaints at the present time. The other thing that they respond to is if a homeowner observes a commercial person dumping debris into a neighborhood debris pile pickup, those are only for the residents. So they are used to dealing with commercial landscapers on these kind of issues. So I don't think, and this is where you're going to have to leave it. I can't speak for Toby, but if you ask Toby, will he take this on? That's the conversation that can take place to help resolve it.
Barry.
Yes, thank you. Good discussion. I think one of the things, the next step in all this beyond, our weighing in on our recommendation, the one thing I'll really give ASPO a lot of credit for, and the task force especially, is taking the lead on this. Because as Paula points out, this is going to get passed on to CSA for enforcement. So we'll basically be saying to CSA, here's how ASPO feels about this. I also give credit to the community for as many people responding. I think as a task force member, I was really surprised. I mean, I've had hearsay kind of things about the noise levels, but to see people weighing in on it, is really good. And I guess the other thing I would say is, as homeowners, even though we're talking about enforcement more for commercial enterprises and things, it's time for all of us also, when it comes time to replacing what we're using on our own properties the other 6 days a week when they're not around, that we definitely consider, trying to be in compliance with these same kind of regulations. So, the next move here is going to LUM, on the CSA side. And there's been a lot of CSA discussion on it. So it's not like they've been out of the loop, or Toby's been out of the loop, or Russell Fredericks has been out of the loop. So LUM will take this on. They'll take the inertia that's coming to them from ASPO, and they'll be making the calls. And then in terms of enforcement, I just think we have to do just what, Ron or Paula said. And, CSA is going to have to figure out, how to respond to it. I think one of the things that will certainly be discussed, they all have to get a tag, each year, to pay their fee to come into the community. Who knows? There might be a prerequisite that said you need to be in compliance, on this. And safety and security, or the security department, can run a tally on number of complaints that they're getting. So there are ways to just create an environment where people kind of need to understand this is what Sea Pines is going to sound like going forward. And we all know it's going to be better. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Dana.
Just one other point, Ron. I appreciate the app on the phone and all of that, but I want to make sure those and certainly as co-chair of LUM and Barry's right. Football's been tossed over for us to look at and think about what to do about this. So that's part of a lot of my questions. The thing is with measuring noise, yes, you can get an accurate reading, but the requirement that the equipment manufacturers follow is based on I think, very specific room scenarios, measuring spaces, reflective spaces, directional noise versus non-directional noise. There are really specific guidances usually in the scientific community when measurements are made. And so the variation in the way in which people might capture that sound with their phones, it is not at all the same as what would be required in a scientific community in measuring equipment and labeling them as meeting a certain standard. So I just want to point that out, that to people who aren't aware of that there's a big difference. There can be a big difference.
Okay, thank you. Paul Crunkleton.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and great job for the task force. I had a couple of quick questions, maybe Ron knows. Do we know how many landscaping companies actually operate here inside Sea Pines?
Toby can answer that question. He knows how many
The
specific.
task force didn't know that?
No, we know the major ones.
Personally, I think it would be interesting to know, because my gut tells me if we look at the neighborhoods, probably 85% of the work is done by the small 1 and 2 person landscaping companies. I think it's important. Have we communicated? I guess it's too early. We've talked to the big guys, and I would assume most of the work the big guys do is not the stuff that's going to be controlled. The large things, the golf courses, the parking lots, that's done by probably the big 3 or big 4, correct, Ron?
Correct.
Okay.
And I did personally speak to 3 different small organizations in terms of what do they do. So I'm familiar with it. And I agree with your observation that in the residential communities, a majority of the residential communities are done by smaller groups.
Yeah.
And that's why we developed the concern for what is the impact on those. The larger groups were very easy to say, look, when Brightview won the last contract for the CSA property,
right,
it was stated in that request for proposal that thou shalt be at 65 decibels at 50 feet.
Yeah, I understand it. We talk about enforcement. It's going to be quite difficult because everybody knows we don't have enough people in the security department to begin with to do the major items. I think this is going to be one issue that might fall down well below the tree, but that's another story. Ron, I know you've looked at other communities, not the towns and the cities and the federal government and the state. I thought we looked at other cities, and other communities, and I thought Palmetto Bluff was one that actually has a sound ordinance that's similar to what we're proposing. Am I wrong there?
Well, Palmetto Bluff, a majority of their landscaping is done by a single company that does comply with 65 decibels at 50 feet.
Okay.
I'm not familiar or certain that they have a requirement that is Palmetto Bluff wide that requires residential people or other people to comply to that. Mm-hmm. But for their general landscaping, that's a requirement. On the Disney Resort on Hilton Head Island, I spoke to their maintenance director a couple of times on it. And they only have battery powered, noise compliant blowers. He was thrilled to hear that there's now gasoline powered noise compliant ones. Mm-hmm. But he then even stated he is not even using the noise compliant blowers on Disney property before 10 a.m. Mm-hmm. So they're very sensitive about it.
Okay.
And the other communities did seem to have a real
But we would be the first community of what we would describe as ourselves, like Palmetto Dunes, Shipyard, Port Royal, that would look at this. Is that correct? Not look at it, we put it into practice.
That's a correct understanding.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I do. I guess that's where another thing that maybe Barry mentioned a little bit that was a little bit confusing, but every year when a commercial person applies for a renewal of their permit, they are given what are the rules that they have to obey within our community. So this would be another rule that they would have to comply with. So that's how they would be. And we could also do some other educational things that I'll leave for Paula and CSA people to figure out how do you educate the people. So I think just even having the guideline, even if there was no real like threat of death or imprisonment, I think you're going to have a large number of people complying. And I think the residential people will turn to their local guy with a one-man crew and say, are you complying? Why not? Can you comply? So I think it will be easier than you think to decrease a majority of the leaf blower noise. But if you don't implement a policy and everybody understands we looked at it and 77% of the community said, let's do it. If you don't have any policy, I think you're then just encouraging, let's go buy the big macho one, even though we have to rev it to get it to the super level. So I think you have to be careful there.
Thank you.
Greg Thompson.
Just a quick thought, we always talk about enforcement. And this may be a case with, as Ron just said, nearly 80% of the people behind the idea to limit the noise level of blowers. The compliance issue may not be as difficult as it might be on other kinds of issues.
Thank you. Grover.
Yeah, two things. If you've ever worked with large groups of people and you're trying to move groups of people toward different environments or influence, if you create a policy or create a recommendation absent enforcement, you begin to create a culture. And in Sea Pines, our residents clearly want a culture of quieter leaf blowers. And by us passing this recommendation, even absent enforcement, we are going to begin to create that culture. Next point is that, yes, there will be ways to enforce it, but there's no way that we're going to control every person, and as far as we can try, but even the enforcement that they do again reinforces the culture that we're trying to create here. My last point is I've been contacted by two board members of CSA, and they are wanting to take this up, and I've actually forwarded them all of our research so that they didn't want to have duplicity in what they were doing. So I'm encouraged that CSA is picking it up too, and I hope that we can pass a recommendation to them of what we want to do.
Lee.
Yeah, I just want to be clear with my comments before that. One, I'm in favor of anything we can do to control the sound. So I wasn't indicating that we shouldn't have it. I think that, whenever you ask people if they're in favor of something, they're in favor of it until there's a cost. And if we really want to enforce this, there will be a cost because we're going to need additional staff if we really want to enforce it. So I'm hoping that as CSA looks at it and looks at the numbers that Ron presented as to how supported it is in the community, that they're willing to take on that cost. So I'm in favor of us approving this. I'm just a little skeptical that CSA is going to do enough to enforce it. That's all.
I think I agree, Lee, to the extent that we don't know what we don't know. And I would suggest this is a dynamic issue. And whatever CSA ends up with will probably not match match exactly what we're putting over the transom. But that's not the point. I mean, the point is that we're representing the homeowners and we're sending the message. So anyway, if there are no thoughts anymore, I'm sorry, Dave. Dave, you're on mute, I think.
Somebody raised the point, and I think it's a very good one. It's a minor item to make, the loud blowers can be used to remove debris after a named storm. There are major weather events other than a named storm. So if we want to, I would suggest that we make that change to remove debris after a major weather event. And then if everybody agrees with that, I would like to recommend that we send this to CSA. Enforcement and adoption and enforcement is going to be in their preview. And as Grover said, CSA is looking at it actively. So if you want to get this to CSA as quickly as possible. Okay. So I'd make that recommendation on the storm issue. And then if somebody wants to move, Grover, maybe you want to move that we make this recommendation to CSA. We get a motion.
Do I hear a motion?
I would agree with that minor change, and I would like to make that motion as stated in the board package.
Do I hear a second?
We're going to have comments.
Okay, all those in favor?
Have we done the comments already? Because I didn't realize we were going to do a vote. If we got to do it, I think we modify. I think the first quarter of 2022. Isn't that what Ron's thing was? First quarter of 2022 implementation.
Okay, there's a motion on the table and it was seconded, Paul.
Yeah, don't we have discussions now?
We did.
Oh,
No.
we've had discussions prior to it.
We didn't have a discussion after the motion was made.
We can have a discussion before the vote, but just know that the motion right now is okay.
Aren't we into? I'm sorry, maybe I preempted. Aren't we into discussion time now?
Yes, we have a second.
Okay.
I haven't called the vote.
Okay, so I apologize. I thought you had started to call it. What I wanted to suggest and recommendation is, I thought Ron said first quarter implementation, first quarter of 2022. Is that right, Ron? Or
yes.
Over? Okay. I think that's too quick. I think realistically, if we want to do this and pass, first of all, I don't think the CSA will even prove it by that time. I'd like to put it further into 2022 from a standpoint of implementation, maybe third quarter. And I'm thinking mainly of the small one person, two person. I think they're going to have a difficulty time meeting that because I would suspect many of them would have to buy equipment. And it's going to be a cost to small. You've seen these small guys. I think they're working on a small margin to begin with. So
yeah, the date is not in the policy. That's up to Steve.
Yeah,
it's a recommendation.
We're giving that to CSA. We're not setting a date because our charging for it.
Okay. So hearing no further comment, all those in favor, Dana, comment?
I'm looking in the meeting, forgive me for my stupidity. I'm looking in the meeting packet for the actual resolution that we're taking a vote on. I don't see it. Could somebody please read it?
It's the last page, but I'll read it to you. Recommended blower noise policy. It says to minimize noise pollution, all blowers must be operated at 65 decibels or less at 50 feet while in residential neighborhoods by lawn and pool service companies. Residential property owners are encouraged to follow this guideline. Louder blowers may only be used as follows: on golf course property, when the blower is on wheels, commonly used to clear debris from large areas such as parking lots, cart paths, and bike trails, or to remove debris after a major storm. If we're going to change that name to a major storm or weather event.
Yeah, major weather event.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll call for a vote. Let me go back so I can see your faces. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, all those, I have a proxy vote from Bill Johnson, who is in favor. All those against, nays? Abstentions? We have one abstention. Okay, so we have 8 in favor and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the Covenant Reform Task Force. And I'm working on that right now. It's a brand new task force. As you know, we met, we have our homework, and it is a mighty assignment of going through covenants, agreements, regulations, rules with opinions on what looks to be outdated and what would be improved with a little tweaking. We plan to meet probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. The land use, the joint CSA ASPPPO Land Use Management Committee. Dana, do you have an update?
It's simply what's in the board
We have
packet.
our homework, and it is a mighty assignment of going through covenants. Okay. I had a question on the land use management report for you. I was just curious, the ARB violations, and I know this is not really an ASPPPO thing, but I'm just curious, working without approval, permit not posted, dumpster without a permit, etc. Do we have any idea what the root cause is? Is it that people don't understand, or that they know and they are deliberately not compliant? Is there any sort of conclusion that you can draw, Dana?
Well, I'd like Lee's input on this as well. I think that it's a mix of things, but we have not had very good enforcement on this. And as a result, a lack of awareness, and many times it's the idea that it's easier to just do something and risk not getting caught.
Deliberate.
Why not?
Okay. All right. Lee?
Some of it's lack of awareness.
Yeah, I think some of it is ignorance of the rules. So some people, you get new owners and they don't read the documents, even though they signed a document that says they read the documents, and they're not aware that they have to go to ARB. Now, where that should be short-cycled is that if they're using a contractor, the contractor ought to know that they can't bring a dumpster or any of those things in without an ARB permit. So the purpose here was to close the gap of those people that don't come to ARB and get a permit, because ARB has no enforcement right on that, which is why it was put into these rules to close the gap that there now is enforcement by land use management to require people to go back and get that approval from ARB.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's a two-pronged sword there. Thank you.
The other update that since our last meeting, which CSA and the annual meeting you brought out, Paula, was that the rules have been approved by CSA board that ASPPPO recommended with some edits, and they will go into effect July 1st. And along with the use of the SmartWebs technology that we're also helping to pay for as a board, as a community.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. And between now and July 1, CSA has posted it on their site for comment. We had it on our site for over a year for comment. We received, I don't think we received any. And so please know if you have any feedback that it is on the CSA website, but July 1 is the date. Finally, it'll be very exciting. Dave, do you have an update for the CSA short-term rental committee?
The only update is what everybody's noticing, the absolute flood of people that continues and have been here, the traffic issues that exacerbated the entire year, the number of people parking all over the place, and the number of bikes that are all over houses that are basically become mini hotels. It's creating a lot of tension between those who are permanent residents and those who are investors. And while there are a number of rules and regulations that get sent to the short-term rental agencies and in turn is sent to the renter themselves. It's like everything else, it gets sent, and whether they read it or not, you can't make them read it. You can't make them obey it until they violate it. And then there's a continuing influx of security going to deal with and ask people to, comply with various things. So it's an issue that is being discussed on many fronts of how to ease the situation or correct it or limit it or whatever, and it's very complex. So there will be more on this in the future because it is a very active topic in the community, and there's a real need to address some of this. So
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Dave. Do you anticipate any type of improvement in A, the culture, and B, the behavior after July 1 when some of these new rules come into effect?
I haven't thought about it, and that would be pure speculation at this time. We'd have to see what happens. But
Alrighty.
it's, also there's a limit, as we all talk about enforcement personnel and the time to enforce it. And these people, are here, a lot of them, for a week. And by the time they get called after 2 or 3 days and you go, then the next week you're dealing with the next group. And so there has to be some mechanism to throw it back onto either the rental agency or the owner of the property in some form or fashion. All of that's being discussed now because everybody recognizes something has got to happen. And it's not just Sea Pines, it's not just Hilton Head. This is, from talking to others, this is a very common problem, particularly since the pandemic, all up and down communities like us throughout the East Coast, where people have, this activity has increased tremendously. And all of them are trying to deal with this. So it's a fairly common, gotten to be a more common issue for communities.
Thank you. The last update we have is
Barry has his hand up. Barry had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barry, please.
No problem. I think Dave made a very important point in what he just said, and that the onus, for the most part, we can talk about short-term renters or the properties involved or whatever. This is really about the owners. Ultimately, yes, responsibility falls on the owners. We can deal with all the mechanics of people in and out and all of that, but the people that are renting, that own these properties, are responsible for what happens at those properties. And I think the more emphasis and understanding there is about that, the better it'll be for all of us.
Yeah. Dana.
To pick up on what Barry just said, that is why if you read the land use rules under the process and how that's going to be enforced, is the owner is notified and the owner has to take action. So although the renters may change from week to week, if the owner is getting a notice and ultimately fines for their property failing to meet the requirements because of the behavior or whatever of the guests, that is a problem. Not all rules, though, are land use rules that we're having issues with. And some of it we talked about are noise issues, which are safety and security, not land use.
Yeah, thank you. Lee Stevens happens to sit on the Architectural Review Board as well, so I asked him for an update from ARB.
Yeah, there really isn't anything new since last month's report. ARB's been short-staffed with one of the 2 staff members being out ill. So I don't have a new report. That's should have something by the time we have our next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, but ARB continues to be active.
Okay, thank you. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Lee.
Yeah, I just want to point out that CSA is moving down the road to hold their 2020 election for 2021 board seats electronically, and only electronically, while using a system that's electronic that will mail to those people that do not have either a cell phone number or an email address with CSA. So at some point, we need to think about how we're going to run our election. If we're going to continue to do it by mail because of the number of email addresses that we don't have, we shouldn't wait till the last minute to make a decision because we may need to run ours separately from CSA.
Oh, when I heard that, I thought, wow, what a great idea. I just thought that was terrific. So thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Well, I think it can only be as successful as the number of emails that we have. So one of the things I'd like to work with membership on in the very near future is a postcard campaign to continue to collect emails, so we can build that too. Dana, you had a
Yeah,
point.
just a couple of things. I apologize for not going into the land use report more thoroughly, that other than refer to your meeting packet. I was fumbling to try to pull it up. I kind of thought it would be pulled up on the screen. So, but I do want to point out that there have been over 700 violations that have been actively worked on since the beginning of the year. That's an enormous volume of work. And not all of them have been resolved. Some of them are still outstanding, about 200, but it certainly speaks to the hard work of Ryan Cash, our land use monitor, and I want to acknowledge that before the meeting's end. Also, I wanted to point out that we do have an active task force, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, as part of ASPPPO, that we have met a couple of times, and we are in the process of putting together a recommendation to the ASPPPO board, hopefully in the next meeting, as to what we think, what service we think ASPPPO may be able to provide our residents for resources for finding assistance to deal with all kinds of issues, whether it be looking for a support group, looking for financial counseling, looking for food, who are dealing with food insecurities, just a whole wide range of problems. And so that's been a very engaged group of volunteers, and I want to acknowledge their participation and thank them, and to let people know that this is an example of the kind of work that ASPPPO can be doing.
Thank you very much. Apologies for not having that on the agenda also. Dave.
On the point that Lee just raised about voting electronically, that's in our bylaws. We can hold elections by mail or electronically. It's just going to be more a question of moving administratively to how to do that.
That was my point, David, that we may not be prepared to move to it as quickly as CSA is. And if we're not, we just need to figure out, is CSA going to continue to run the election for us, or do we need to make other plans?
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I did have one thing I wanted to bring up under new business. I got an email after the annual, or we collectively had gotten an email after the annual meeting from an interested member who is a non-resident, and just said, 9 o'clock in the morning for somebody that's not retired is kind of tough. Do you think and so I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't try having some board meetings at 3:30 in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Perhaps that would encourage more remote participation, and to apply that to the annual meeting as well. To make that later on in the day as well. Any thoughts on that? Are you all okay with that? Good. I mean, I'm not a morning person either, but Paul?
Yeah, my thought would be to keep it at 9. I'm not a morning person, but 9 o'clock you can get the thing done and have the rest of the day. 3:30 is not. I know you just suggested 3:30 could be any time, but my recommendation would be to keep it at 9. Can't be that many people that can't get up in time for a 9 o'clock meeting.
No, it's not a question of getting up in time for a 9 o'clock meeting. It was a question of conflicting with work schedules and everything else that happened in the morning.
Okay, I got you now.
So, yeah. Grover?
Say if we determine that we would have a significant increase in participation from property owners in our meetings, we should move that direction.
Yeah,
Maybe
let's
a
try
third.
it. Yeah, let's try it and see what happens. Yeah.
Let me add a comment. I think what CSA is experiencing is that because the video is posted and remains online of the meetings, that the actual live attendance watching the meeting is smaller, but the number of views later on, the clicks onto the video, much larger number than those who watch live. So that there's some value in having the meeting streamed and people can watch the meeting at their convenience. There's also some value in bookmarking the meeting because some people want to look at the agenda and only see certain items and not listen to all the discussion. So there's a technique to bookmark the various items, agendas on there, so if people want to see something just particular and skip other things, they can. So that's a feature that is available and it seems to be working from what I gather on CSA meetings.
So you're talking about on the video itself. So
Yes.
you can click on and go to that part of the video. Okay, thank you. We'll check it out. Great.
Could we do a survey on our next newsletter and give people a chance to respond as to whether or not they would be
Sure.
more inclined to attend live?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. It's a good idea. Okay. With no further comments, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Question? Paula, just our next meeting. I have it down as September 23rd. So we don't have anything in June, July, or August?
No, we do not.
Okay.
There'll be committee meetings. There'll be task forces. If an issue comes up, I will call a special meeting or a board workshop. So, okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Paul, thank you. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Paul.
Are we doing a Q&A after, or?
We'll do a 5-minute Q&A and I'll check and see if anything has come into info@aspo.net, in which case we'll answer the question. But in the meantime, we'll take 5 minutes. Thank you for the reminder. Hmm. Hmm. We do not have, let's see. Okay. Can you all hear me? We did not receive any questions, so everything is adjourned now. And I want to thank everybody for your participation this morning. Good working with you.
Okay.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Bye now.